Okay, before we dive in and look at, what Claude is planning, how it's going through that process, looking at it actually building the code, I'm going to show you the actual outcome first. So I'm already logged in, so I'm going to go to the dashboard, and here I am as a user, and I can see my schedule for the month. I can see that I've got a walk on the 5th and so on. Today's highlighted. I can change mode, look at the week, see it as an agenda, which that should probably be the default. How many activities I've got coming up, how many I've already done. Here's a history of all my activities as a list. Available activities, there aren't any in here, but if one of the admins had added an activity, there was still people required for it, then that would appear here. I am able to say specific times when I'm not available. So, let's say December. So I'm not available from the 18th to the back to December. Okay, so things like the validation on that could be better. But we've not actually done a whole lot. You'll see we don't do that much iteration while Claude is coding, and this is the kind of stuff that you can either go in and change yourself manually if you have those skills, or you can say, hey, look, I would like a different layout, because these text date fields are obviously far too wide, but it's pretty cool. Can't be away for more than 3 weeks. Okay, so there's some validation there as well. Let's do that to the 1st of January 26. Okay, so now it's showing my various holidays and so on. Because this individual, Sarah Johnson, is an admin, it's showing me a link to the admin panel, so let's just quickly go there. This is where people who are admins would add activities and can see the data for reporting and so on. So this shows us how many sessions have been done by the various volunteers in terms of the number of hours that they've done. All sessions are 2 hours within the system at the moment, but that could vary, and that could be used as a parameter for distributing the activities to various people based on the number of hours that they've done so far. I can add new activities. You can see here's the whole list of them. I can add one. I have my 3 different types of activity, when it's scheduled for, again it's a calendar and a time picker, how long that's going to take, and the status, it could be cancelled and so on, so that's great. Let's get rid of that. And then assignment seems to be the activities that are already assigned to individuals. So we can go in and we can see who's going to be on those. Then in the user list itself, we can see who does and who doesn't have various qualifications at a glance, who is and who isn't an admin, how many activities they've done even, that's good. And then when I go into a particular user, I can see a history of their activities, what they've got coming up and so on. And I can change their status very easily just using the toggle switch. So yeah, it's pretty comprehensive, and it was created in about 40 minutes from Claude starting on the spec, and iterating a little bit and working with some errors that came up. So yeah, so that's what we're going to dive into and look at now. At this point, Claude has read the plan and has some questions, and we can see here we have calendar, algorithm, availability, and these are topics that it wants answers to. So the first one is around calendar because it wants to install a library. So I'm just going to go with its main recommendation. On algorithm, so it's asking if we want to have a fair distribution of the work, if we want to avoid back-to-back assignments. I can see why you would do that because you might have to travel between them, but I think that fair distribution is what we want to go for in this case. So to choose the one you want, you just use your arrow keys to go between them and then the spacebar to select or enter. So I will go with fair distribution. And click next. Availability. So this is to do with essentially scheduling holidays. It's actually about non-availability. So yeah, I'm just going to say keep it simple and auto-assign things. Although actually, no, it would be good to be able to have some holiday time in there and to let Claude deal with a slightly more complex algorithm. Okay, so it's gone away. Here we are 5 minutes later and it's finished the actual plan. I've gone through the plan and I like the fact that it gives estimated deliverables. Sometimes what it does is in a large project it will go part of the way through and you know, keep that as a kind of to-do list and it'll say, okay, do you want to test this section now? But I'm okay with the plan. So there was just a couple of things that I wanted to change. It said that it wanted to use Filament version 3, which is not the current version, so we may as well go for Filament version 4. And for the availability, so a factory is a piece of code that will construct data and fill in fake data essentially, and that's what we need to do. We need to seed the database with you know, a few years of data. So in order to test the availability feature, we need some of the users to actually have periods when they're not available, be that like for a few weeks or so, just to replicate that kind of holiday pattern. So I'm giving it some guidance here to say essentially there would be some validation so that you wouldn't be able to take more than 3 weeks every 4 months. Now at this stage I have an option to, you know, auto accept and just let it do what it wants, or I can check every decision that it makes before it goes and makes any changes. Because we're doing a demo, I've done auto accept. It will still stop and check things, but particularly if you've already given it prior permissions to run certain kinds of commands, it will do that. So now it wants to create a migration, which is a change to the database structure, and it's asking for permission because obviously that's quite a critical thing to do. So it's asking if we want to proceed, and we will say yes. Generally I wouldn't allow it just to I wouldn't use auto accept and allow it to do whatever it wants, and certainly in the beginning when you start to use Claude Code, I advise that you don't anyway, because you miss out on a lot of what it's doing. So it will take longer to create applications, but it's better if you see what it's doing step by step. But I'm quite happy for it to, you know, run artisan commands in this scenario, because this isn't we've not even seen the tool and we need it to actually go away and seed a lot of data. So I'm gonna allow it to do that. It is restricted, as you can see. I've highlighted the actual folder, the project folder, and while we are giving it permissions to run artisan commands, that is restricted to within that project folder. So if you moved over to another project, it may ask you the same again, and you may decide, absolutely no way, I'm not going to let you run artisan commands, and you may do those yourself. Okay, so I gave it those permissions to go and run the migrations and continue with the work, and it's telling us that it's completed the work and what it's done. At the bottom there was a summary saying work that remains to be done, so it's kind of paused halfway through just to check, or rather to get me to check that everything's okay. So let's look at it in the browser, and yeah, so normally here, if I was building this, I would expect to see you know, the activities, the users in the navigation and so on. So you know, I logged in, it's fine, it's working, things are installed, but there's no actual kind of meat on the table, as it were. It has populated the database. It has it has built the dashboard, but it hasn't done what's called creating filament resources yet. And when it does that, essentially it will go to the database and the what are called the models, Laravel models, which kind of reflect the database and enable you to create records, display records, update records, and so on. And when it creates the filament resources, you will be able to list, you know, users, add activities, delete, edit activities, and so on. So essentially we're going to ask it just to continue, really. So it's done some more work, it's given us some login, and we can see, yeah, this is more like what I would expect to see. We've got the menu on the left with the various activities and users and so on. It's given me, there's no data in the graph yet, so we'll have to have a look at what it's done there in terms of, I think it may be because it hasn't done any past activities. Yeah, that would make sense because it's saying 0 hours completed and 956 hours committed or already upcoming. We've got 9 volunteers. How many activities we've done? Yeah, I don't think it assigned any of those past activities to volunteers. But look, the bare bones of it is there, which is good. It's listing our activities, showing all the types. It's color coding different things, which is nice. The types of activities that I specified are in there. We can filter on them and so on. This is all out of the box with Filament. It's very common to use Filament for admin panels. So it's not so much that Claude Code is building this from scratch, but it does know how to use Filament. So yeah, that all kind of looks good to me. I can change activities. I noticed in the scheduling that stuff could be cancelled, so I didn't actually specify that, but it, you know, it knows, which is good. If we look at assignments, it's done a good job there as well. It's added oops, okay, so now this is a layout error. I've seen this before. Although I told it to specifically install Filament version 4, it still sometimes uses Filament version 3 conventions, and so there were some changes to the layout and so But that's good. We've got an error. Well, this is good. It's showing for each user the number of activities they've done. Okay, so we've got the same error again. Now the good thing about that is, well, first of all, everything has gone well up to now, and that won't be the case when you do your programs. But the Laravel errors are pretty well documented, and it actually has a little button on some of them where you can say, okay, copy this as markdown, so you can actually drop that into Claude, and you don't even need to particularly tell it what was going on. As I say, just boom, copy as markdown, and then in Claude there are sufficient references as to, you know, where the error happened, what the error was, what the exception was, all of that kind of stuff, and it gives you some data as well. Okay, so we're also getting some errors in the user dashboard as well. So let's actually get some of these errors solved before we move on to adding other stuff or doing any iteration. So I've done copy as markdown, and now I'm going to say, you know, before continuing, please solve the errors that I've encountered. And I'm going to paste the first one in, and it seemed quite vague, but to be honest, there's so much detail. It's usually about like 100 lines long, the error. So I'm going to paste it now, and you'll just see a reference to it telling you it's doing 117 lines. There's the whole thing, and now Claude's actually reading that and thinking about what to do to fix that. And we're on accept edits, so it will go and make any changes that it can find. So that was the key sort of human readable error message, if you like, and then the rest of this is what's called the stack trace, which shows you kind of the steps that the program went through before it actually kind of flipped out and had an error. So right in the middle of the screen there, it has found the error, and it says, I can see the issue in Volt functional components, computed properties should be accessed directly, yada yada yada. Now, if you recall, when I installed the starter pack, it said, do you want to install Volt? And I said no. So that's an option, and Claude has assumed that I followed the standard convention and said yes. So when it's making Livewire components, it has used the Volt conventions for that. So I'm going to have to basically tell it to go and convert all of those to kind of like old style Livewire, as it were. Yeah, it's looking through them. This will be quite boring, so I'll take a pause, and we'll get back when it has some results. And we're back. It's done some fixes. It's telling me, hey, everything should work correctly now. I don't think it will, because I haven't yet told it that, you know, I didn't install. Yep, there we go. There's an error. I haven't yet told it, you know, there's a wider issue that I didn't actually install Volt. And Claude and probably others tend to do this, where, you know, they'll fix the error in front of them, and not, you know, think about the whole context. So now I'm going to tell it that, you know, oops, we're actually working in a slightly different way to what you're assuming, and it'll then have to go through, I mean, it's perfectly capable of doing this, but it now has to go through and rework all of the components that it has created. That won't be an issue, because, you know, essentially it was working to one convention. Now it'll just work to another convention. So let's see what it comes up with. Okay, so 6 minutes later and some more errors, and everything appears to be fixed, at least in that set of errors with Volt. And look, we have our volunteer panel, which looks pretty cool. We've got a calendar as expected, and it's saying things like, you know, my activities. I can move through the calendar to the next month and so on, as you would expect. Through the months, through to January next year. Okay, so it has filled out future events, that's good. What happens if we click on one? We don't get any sort of info. What's this? 10 a. Okay, so that's 10 a.m. Yeah, okay. So it's just using native browser alerts there. That's okay. You could put something more sophisticated in. This 10A and 3P, that's AM and PM, so I would prefer to just use the full thing there, so we could make a note about that and get it to change things. The activities for that individual, I can see what's upcoming, what's pending, and what I've done in the past. Yeah, there's no past activities. If it was the case that there were some activities that hadn't been filled with volunteers, then that would appear in the available activities, and I could, you know, sign up for things. And here's my holiday time. So yeah, I mean, it's looking pretty good. You know, what you now have to do is essentially go and test it manually, because while things may work within automated tests and so on, you'll pick up a lot just by going through things. I mean, for example, those dates, the from date and so on to the end date, those are enormous fields. It doesn't need to be laid out like that at all. But you know, it's at least using a decent layout to get you started. I've just spotted something quite cool now. Because this user is an admin, it included admin panel in the volunteer navbar, and it gives me a direct link into the admin section, which is pretty cool. In the users list in admin, so these PVG leader admin, these are just Boolean values, and I like, oops, okay, there's that layout error. Yeah, I forgot about that, but I like that it's converted them, you know, to a tick or a cross depending on the Boolean value itself. Yeah, I talked about this error earlier. This is filament 4 error that comes up if you use filament 3 conventions. So I need it to address those things. If you look in the bottom left of the screen, you can see context left until auto compact 11%. So as you do more and more work, the context window fills up. So it's essentially kind of its memory, if you like, although it's not a persistent memory. It's just, you know, something that it's using at the time. Yeah, and that gets filled up over time because it's looking up documentation. It's, you know, making notes to itself about, you know, things that it's built and how that would affect the application generally. And yeah, every few hours it has to compact that down, which essentially means that it's going to make a summary for itself, clear up a whole load of space, and then continue. So anyway, so I told it to go away and fix those errors, so let's see what it comes up with. Yeah, you can see here it's like looking up some documentation. Here we are 30 seconds later, and it says, okay, I've, you know, fixed those errors, so let's go back to where we were, and boom, okay, it really has fixed those errors. And that's a nice little looking user editing screen. You got the toggles for those Boolean values that I mentioned earlier. Yep. And back to the users. Yeah, new user, great. I'm going to cancel that. Yeah, it's fairly functional. If we go back to the dashboard, you may recall, yeah, it's still not showing the hours done by volunteers. It does have completed activities, so I think the assignment to the volunteers isn't happening correctly. So I'm going to go and point that out to Claude and see what it comes up with. So I went through and had a look at some of the other areas where there were some missing bits, and you can see now the graph is there. Not the colors I would have chosen, yellow and green, it's a bit odd, but you know, we can see that it's functional now. So look, this took about 2 hours from, you know, writing the spec to installing the Laravel project, and you know, getting Claude prompted and ready to, you know, like read the spec and get going. If I had gone with the Livewire and Volt option, I think it would have, you know, cut the whole thing down by half an hour. But essentially, you know, we have a pretty functional prototype here that you can take to your users and say, look, hey, is this in line with, you know, what you need? You should really have them in at the beginning, you know, helping you write that spec document, and you can see that even if it does take 2 hours to build this kind of stuff, to actually have people sit down with you, you know, who are going to be using this, who have domain expertise, it's worth it to get everyone around the table, get their input, because as developers we often, you know, think about, oh, well, this is how it should work, but the reality of how things work in people's jobs can be very different. So I hope you enjoyed this more complex application and you'll try some stuff out yourself.